Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear me.
This is Brian. How's everybody doing?
Hi,
Hello?
Brian. Doing really well. Can you hear us?
Yes, yeah. I just I gave that really aggressive intro and no one said anything, so I felt really embarrassed for a second. But
I was just unmuting.
okay, so we're doing the YouTube thing from last time, or are we doing the just regular Zoom?
We are. It's the same YouTube process.
Okay. Yeah, and so
Uh,
just the
Brad,
the
can you hear
speakers will
us?
just
Oh yeah, sorry. I guess I was double muted. I was muted on the computer and my phone. So no, I'm here.
great. And so, Brad, just a heads up. So the way this is basically piped into our virtual event environment, so it's not going to show any live people on this particular platform. But don't freak out. There are people in the event. We had like 700 registered and about 100 or so in the platform today. So there's definitely an audience, even though somewhere it might show something like 0 viewers.
Okay, sounds good.
And Brad, you also have your video enabled. I'm not sure if you want to use video, but if not, maybe just disable that. Or I can disable it for you if you want.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that.
I think at the bottom there's a video thing, but she can probably handle it for you.
I've handled that.
Stop. Okay, great.
Yeah. I normally, moving forward, as I've said before, I think we should look into doing video. But since we didn't talk about that, I don't know that everyone's going to be in a room or wearing nice clothes or want to be on camera. So we'll just do audio for today.
Sounds good.
And I assume there are no questions. I mean, the questions were pretty much in line with our discussion, so I don't think there are any major edits there. As far as an intro slide, I don't believe I received one from Amy or Josh, but I have one on file for you, so I assume that's fine because you've done a lot of these roundtables. So it's really just your bio.
Yeah, that should work.
And I'm going to be sharing my screen, so let me know when I should share that.
We can do a test run now, Brian, if you want.
Yeah, I'm downloading the slides right now. Give me 1 second. Yeah, it might be good to do that because I'm using a Mac because it's more reliable for the internet and stuff, but I'm not quite as familiar with Mac as I am with Windows, so I want to make sure I get everything right. Was there like I remember last time there might have been something I was supposed to hit like regarding audio or something?
Correct. So when you share your screen, Brian, when that pop-up window appears, there's a small checkbox right at the bottom left that says enable computer audio. So just check that before you share your desktop.
Okay, I'm doing that now. And you see my screen now?
We do. And now it's full screen.
And this all looks good?
It does.
I don't know why hold on, I gotta find why that came out black. That should be white. Here, let me work on that real quickly.
Sure.
I'm going to step away from my desk for just a moment. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
And just to know, Brad, real quick, I'm going to actually just add it to our existing slide template because it just to make it cleaner because I don't know why it's showing up incorrectly. So it's going to have all the information and logos and all that.
Okay.
Good, and it was a good show. It's gonna grow up. Good, and this means that you guys, this means you guys get them for December, shared services week, banking and financial services. Good, good. No, that's great to hear. Good. Now go to the airport, have them here and what's the description.
I'm back, FYI.
Great. I think Brian just stepped away.
I didn't step away. I'm just working on making sure I get the slides to look presentable. They are really not showing up correctly on Mac, but I want to make sure that his company is represented properly.
Hi, Adit. How are you?
No, I know what you mean. And you know, the thing is, there's a couple things. So one thing that might be interesting, we limit our sponsorship to this program to 20 sponsors, and we limit also on the vendor category. So you won't be in a room with more than 2 other companies that are similar in regards to your status in the market. So I think similar to you guys have conversations with Melissa and with Impop, which I hope they're a little bit more like security design there. But we limit that because it's not useful for any bringing with like ad agencies or for executives on that side. The other thing is that well, when you have like 10 of the same category, and you're like, wait, I came here for my journey mapping and what's going on, but no.
Hi, Adit. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that we can hear you. Yeah.
Great.
Hey, dude. So this is Brian. I'll reiterate what I said to Brad. So we are piping this feed into our virtual event environment. And so it's not necessarily going to show attendees in this version of the webinar platform, but obviously there are people there. We officially crossed 700 registrations by the time we went live. And we've seen, I believe, 180 use the platform, and a good amount of those, some of those are unique to today as well.
Great.
But yeah, I didn't want you, because I know that probably somewhere it shows like 0 listeners or something, and I didn't want you to think that you're talking to no one.
No, I trusted that there were at least some people in there.
And I'm actually going to real quickly just share the screen, because I actually don't know that we ever got like a separate photo of you, and we found one online, but I want to make sure it's the right person because it was kind of vague. So let me pull that up real quick.
Oh, no.
And so, Brad, you can see, so I just recolored it so everything would be clear there.
Yep, that worked.
And for you, Adit, so this is is that you?
It is. It's like 10 years ago, but it's me.
Well, yeah, it's a good picture. It wasn't the highest res, but yeah, we didn't see anything on LinkedIn, and I looked through the nice website for a long.
Oh, I wish you had reminded us. We would have sent you. We have quite a few pictures of me.
No problem. The way this thing is structured, Brad's head is a little distorted, so no one looks perfect there. So, and I'm not even showing my picture, so I'm in no position to criticize.
Yeah, and Brad, it looks like my face is about 3 times the size of your face. Just so you know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes, and so the slides will basically just follow along with the list of questions that I sent over. I will do a brief intro to the topic, really along the lines. The theme is going to be essentially that we know organizations have their own problems in the back end, but not only can you not show those to your customer, but you also have to commit yourself internally to addressing what's wrong for customers. And so really thinking about what pain points customers have and how as an operation you can kind of come together to resolve those. And then that'll naturally tie into the intro, as I'll introduce both of you. I'll pass to your screen. So for you, Adit, it was more of a broad, nice screen slide that Robert had sent. And obviously Brad's familiar with his bio slide. And then once you guys do your brief intros, we'll jump right into the questions. Anytime, we'll get to the end where you have a chance to kind of maybe talk about some success stories or just a little bit more about your solutions. And any questions that the vFairs team gets, they'll pass to me, and I'll ask those based on relevance as well as who they might be directed to.
Brian, the screen that Robert sent wasn't intended as an intro. It was intended to be in the background while we talk about the solution.
Okay.
At the end.
That's fair enough.
It's not really an intro slide.
I wondered that, so let me see if I can move that.
Yeah, move it to the end. I wish I had sent a little bio slide, but I didn't know we would have anything in the background at that point. Okay.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, and actually, again, I just sort of thinking you had done that, had kind of done a makeshift one for Brad just because I didn't want him to feel left out when I thought I had one from NICE, but now it's kind of went in reverse. But either way, like I said, the intros are meant to be very basic. I'm not a big bio person. I'm much big into content, and I really want to showcase you as thought leaders, not just fun people, because people can figure that out, but they're going to buy from you if they trust you.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna go get water real quick, or I guess we'll start right at 1:31 or so. VFairs team.
Yeah, it will go live in 2 minutes. So when you come back, people might already kind of be logged in.
And just a quick thing, when I go into full screen, I don't see the menu anymore. Is that going to be a problem for me?
No, we can hear you just fine, and we can see the slides also fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'll be right back.
It's 1:30.
You got to call it like pizza.
Yeah, I know. I heard that too, but it was good. He's just kind of like stuck on like, he's like, we're just not ready for this. It's not ready. Like, I don't understand. Like all these people who are saying everything is fun. You're gonna be ready.
And so just give me a signal when I'm meant to start.
You can start.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with what is always one of our top sessions at the CCW Digital Virtual Events, and that is our Executive Roundtable. Oftentimes, you get one perspective, and granted, we have some great perspectives, award winners, game changers in the industry, a lot of tremendous insights throughout the agenda. But there's nothing quite like that back and forth, that idea of conflicting and contrasting, and yes, of course, sometimes aligned perspectives from different experts who deal with different kinds of businesses and talk to different people in the industry and have different passions when it comes to the customer experience. And today I'm particularly thrilled about our roundtable because we're starting with something that's very research driven. We recently, as you guys know, if you follow CCW Digital at all, published our Customer Experience Executive Report. And in doing research for this report, we didn't just ask contact center professionals what they think. We didn't just ask businesses what they're doing. We went out to the end user consumer market. We specifically contacted them to understand where their pain points are, where their challenges exist, and what that means for businesses as they work to create customer delight. And so based on that conversation, we identified these 5 customer pain points, and today we're going to be walking through them. Now, before we start, I want to remind you that while these are customer pain points, they're the company's problem. And I get it. Many of you have your own pain points. You know that there's challenges internally. Maybe you don't have the budget you need. Maybe you don't have the buy-in from the right people. Maybe you have disintegrated systems. Whatever it may be, there's going to be back-end challenges that probably make your life difficult or frustrating at times. And what I'm saying, though, is that those challenges cannot be visible to external customers. Whatever's going on in the back end needs to be a back end issue. It should not compromise the quality of the customer experience, because when it does, that leads to that kind of customer frustration, which is a much bigger problem to have operationally. But more importantly, you also have to start to think about not only fixing your own problems internally and preventing those from hitting the customer, but what problems the customer has, what pain points they're experiencing, and make sure you, on the operational side, on the back end, can alleviate those. That you can think about what's causing frustration and strife for your customers and ensure that that is properly remedied moving forward. And so what we're going to be focusing on today is really to address some of those common pain points, but more importantly, what you can do about them from an operational standpoint to make sure that you're delivering customers not only freedom from pain, but true delight and true satisfaction. We have 2 great roundtable speakers with us today. We have Brad from Calabrio and Adit from NICE. Both have many years in the industry really analyzing what different organizations are doing when it comes to connecting with customers, studying customer pain points, studying pain points from organizations like all of you listening as you try to alleviate those customer pain points. And so I'm hyping them up, but I figured why not turn it over to our actual speakers to tell you a little bit about who they are. So Brad, I'll start with you. What are you doing? What's your situation right now with Calabrio? What are you focused on from a customer experience standpoint?
Yeah, great, Brian. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, so the Innovation Center at Calabrio is my realm. We are really the customer success wing of Calabrio. That's really what we live and breathe, is making sure that our clients are getting the absolute most out of their solutions, out of their contact center resources, and we're constantly looking for new ways to enable them to get the most out of those resources. So we're constantly working on new projects, launching new services, and very exciting time to be at Calabrio and specifically part of the Innovation Center. Thanks for having me.
And I like what you said there about, I think, really getting the most out of what you have and starting to think about ways to kind of create that customer success and delight. And I'm going to definitely come back to that throughout the discussion as I ask you some of today's questions. Dee, before we actually jump into the pain points, I actually want to let you tell a little bit about yourself, what you're doing at NICE, what your take is right now on the state of the customer experience.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I mean, I've been at NICE for about 6 years, but I've been passionate about the world of customer experience for over 15 years now, and in customer experience technology. And my role and what we do within my organization is really aligning our customers at NICE to the voice of their customers, to the customer journey, and using that in order to help their experience and be competitive in that market. And our passion is understanding that journey and having a really analytical understanding of everything that concerns our customers from their perspective in order to improve it, in order to be able to get to the next level and really compete well in the market.
Excellent. And again, I think that's the idea of tying this to competition is huge, not looking at it just as a fun endeavor, but something that will truly differentiate yourself and allow you to thrive in this era where, frankly, the barriers to entry are so much lower due to the rise of technology. It's much easier for competitors to emerge. And so the customer experience is where you can kind of keep them from overtaking and stepping on your toes. First pain point is a very simple one, speed. And this is actually, we did a variety of different surveys, asked this question in a variety of different ways, and speed consistently came up as a top priority for today's customers. That said, they're not always getting it. It is one of the big sources of complaints as well. So Brad, starting with you, if you had to identify what's maybe causing delays, why the typical organization can't satisfy customers as quickly as they would like, what would some of those operational challenges be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, if you think about things from a customer's perspective, right? We've all been there. We've all dialed into a contact center, gone through a more than likely frustrating IVR process, only to find that we don't really have none of the options that are available are really meeting what we need. So we hit 0 to go talk to somebody. We have to probably wait on hold 15 to 20 minutes before we get through to somebody. We finally get to the person. We go through the whole, they verify us. We go through our whole spiel about what our issue is, why we're calling in, only to find out that they have to transfer us to another department and we have to start over all again. So, I mean, it is an unfortunately all too common occurrence in the contact center world. And there are a lot of things that go into it, right? I mean, first of all, starting with the IVR, right? Making sure that we have a clean IVR experience for our clients. Once they get through the that they can actually select what they are looking for and get to the most common issues that people have, that they have a route to do that. When they finally do choose that route, we have to make sure that we have the right resources available, right? From a workforce management perspective, we have to make sure we have enough people there to meet our service level goals and the goals for average speed of answer that our clients are going to have. And then on top of that, we have frustration once we actually get into the customer having to deal with verification systems that can be overly involved and can slow us down when we might just have a quick question, but no, before we answer that question, we've got to verify who you are, even if it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with something specific to your account. So there's a lot of things that go into it. It really boils down to the whole journey that the customer has with your organization. So, at a very high level, and we're going to get into more specifics as we move along, I think today, but at a very high level, I think that the answer is look at things from the perspective of your customer and really understand what their frustration points are, where those delays are. We live in a fast-paced world. People want answers now. What's stopping them from doing that? So very high-level answer. Lots of things can impact that. I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, but those are some of the challenges, and I think that's also what it looks like to the customer. So right off the bat, I mean, what are some fixes you would recommend? I think we're going to probably throughout variety of today's discussion talk about a lot of the ways you can kind of fix it and address these challenges, but right off the top of your head, some basic ones that you could start to make progress on.
Yeah, the first one to me, I think it's foundational, is dealing with the route that people take to get into the contact center, right? So if they're calling in through the phone, analyze your IVR, make sure we're monitoring those channels. What's the percentage of people that are zeroing out compared to selecting individual channels or self-service? That's going to tell you a lot about the effectiveness of your IVR. And almost every organization that I've ever dealt with could use a refresher on the way that their IVR is set up. So that'd be the first area that I'd look at. And then on top of that, again, making sure that we have the right staff that have the right skills to handle those things and have them in place. So make sure that you have some sort of a workforce management solution, whether you're forecasting on an Excel spreadsheet, a workforce management platform, whether you're writing it on the back of a napkin. But you need to have some sort of a plan and a forecasting ability from a workforce perspective to make sure you have the right resources. And then finally, again, a big frustration for a lot of folks is the whole verification process. So it's really important that, and again, we know verification is important, especially in a lot of industries where we're dealing with sensitive customer information. I don't want to downplay that, but I do think that there are certain organizations that probably have more strict verification processes than they need to have. But the one thing that's really the one unforgivable sin within an organization is if I'm verified at one point of my discussion with your contact center, I should not have to verify myself again. So make sure that when we're transferring calls throughout the contact center, that there's metadata attached to every contact, whether it's a call, a chat, whatever it happens to be, so that we can say, yep, I see that you've been verified. What can I help you with today? And ideally, again, they also have an idea of what the problem is before the call was transferred over. So have systems in place to help your agents communicate with each other more effectively when transferring a call. So those are some high-level remedies for some of those issues.
Now, Adit, much of what Brad said, particularly at the end of his conversation, really tied into the potential for disruption as you move between channels. The idea that you may have to repeat information, the idea that it might not be consistent across those channels. And it's funny because, if we think about some of the digital channels, they're very much promised as a quick, easy, effortless way to solve problems. But it seems like if not done right, they could actually cause more of a hassle. So what's your kind of take on the omnichannel journey and maybe what its impact has been on speed of resolution? Yeah,
it is definitely an issue that's emerging more and more with the emphasis on digital transformation and the self-service channels. I completely agree with Brad on looking at things from a customer's perspective. I think that's a really, really key point. And from a customer's perspective, we all know that we look at the efficiency of a specific journey, not limited to the calls that are coming into the call center. We're looking across every way that we interacted with the brand, from the website to an advertisement to the IVR to the call center to every other channel of interaction. I'll give an example, something that happened to me, unfortunately, a couple years ago. My apartment was broken into, and I went through a claims process for an insurance company. And when I called the call center, I was there they took my information about the claim, and they scheduled an adjuster extremely quickly. So that call center had a great speed of answer, had a great average handle time, everything was good. But then the adjuster came late visiting my home. The entire back office process of the claims process was really, really slow. And the overall perception I had as a consumer is that this process of claims is slow. The Call center did its job, and the KPI was there, but other aspects, even the physical aspects, like an adjuster, not necessarily self-service, were not as done as well, and therefore my perception of that overall journey is not about a specific channel, and we have to remind ourselves that as organizations. NICE does that all the time, that it's not just about one organization or one touch point doing a good job. It's about the perception the customer has, which is the entire customer journey. So bottom line, when you're looking at that, of course, you need to optimize each channel separately, and you mentioned consistently in channels, that's great. But if I had 3 things that I would have every organization take a look at in this day and age, is number 1, make sure they optimize for the entire journey and not just for each of the channels within that journey, but looking at the entire journey. Number 2, optimize based on what's really happening, not a gut or a guess on what's happening, but really understand how many of your customers are going through this type of journey. How is that affecting you as an organization and your brand perception, and fixing the problems that are acute? And the third is keeping your finger on a pulse. A lot of the organizations today will do that omni-channel journey analysis as a one-time project or every couple of years, where there are tons of changes. The IVR is a great example of that, and I like that remark from Brad. IVRs were always assumed as a set and forget channel. Right, we set it, we go through a big consulting effort in order to figure out what the best path is for our customers in it, and then we assume that's never going to change. Well, markets change, products change, customers change, and quite frequently these days, and suddenly it's not consistent with other channels, it's not as effective, and we don't have the full visibility into what's happening on the day-to-day. So keep your finger on the pulse of every channel as well as the full journey, so that you can understand if you are being as agile today as you were yesterday, and if your efficiency needs improvement as you go along. It's not a one-time project.
That makes sense. And so, but ultimately, is it true that, when you start to think, because you did provide some guidance as far as how we can start to make the experience more efficient throughout the journey, but I'm wondering, does that involve, I think, looking at channels in different ways? So for instance, maybe looking at one channel as more of an information gathering, routing channel, another as a resolution channel, or do you simultaneously need to make sure that they're not only efficient, but also effective, and that any channel can sort of solve any problem? How do you kind of approach, I think, the customer's journey across the channels to make it the most as efficient as possible?
Yeah, you definitely need to approach it from a customer's perspective. There is I would say, a channel alignment or channel passion to some customers. So, some customers prefer the web no matter what. Some customers prefer the call center no matter what. So there's some level of consistency that you need to provide in order to make sure that each of these are happy, that there's an efficiency and a consistency and an alignment of process for each of these channels. But you bring up an interesting point that I've always believed, is that there are different expectations from different channels today. And you really need to understand those expectations. And that brings us back to the customer perspective. So your beginning point is still understanding. How do I analyze and understand and have an ongoing understanding of how our customers are using our channels, and therefore that will help me understand, and even if I apply some good analytics onto it, understand why they're using it that way and what they're expecting, not what I'd like them to do, as in journey mapping. Let's map what we think customers should be doing, but let's take a look at what customers are actually doing and what that means about what they want and what they expect, and really using that information to optimize those channels. It's a little different for every industry, but I think the answer to your question, unfortunately, is both consistency, but at the same time, understanding the differences in expectations and, quite honestly, consumer profiles for each of these channels.
That makes sense. In fact, that very much aligns with those who were here yesterday for a Gerald from Evernote session, looking at the intent behind omnichannel as a huge part of the process. So I think we're all on the same page there, that you really need to make sure you understand why customers are engaging and then build the best possible experience around that. As we move into pain point 2, so we talked about how speed is a problem. Customers hate waiting around to get their problem solved. Well, if they hate waiting on one call to get their problem solved, you can only imagine that they probably really don't like the idea of having to call back for the same issue. And so naturally, first contact resolution, or in this case, the lack thereof, is another huge pain point for customers. Now, Brad, obviously, everyone listening knows this. FCRs, if anything, are cliche when it comes to recommended metrics and recommended goals for contact centers. So I don't think I'm breaking any new ground by saying it's important, but I am perhaps curious then, if everyone knows it's important and everyone kind of wants to achieve it, what kind of stands in the way of more organizations not solving interactions on the first contact?
Yeah, it's a great question, because to your point, everybody really understands, how important this is, and again, it goes back to putting yourselves in the shoes of your customers. We've all been there where we've called into contact centers and we've had an issue that we needed to have resolved, and we think maybe we're getting it resolved on the first call, but then we find out later that that's not the case, and we have to call back again and go through the whole rigmarole a second time, a third time, a fourth time, sometimes more, and customer satisfaction drops off precipitously whenever we have to call in more than one time. There's tons of studies that have been done on that. So again, not breaking any new ground. So in my opinion, what causes a lot of these things, it is lack of attention to detail. It can some little factors can go into not resolving a customer's issue on the first pass. I'll give you an example of a customer that I worked with a while ago that was having some first contact resolution issues, and they were interested in investigating that and finding out the root cause. So we used our speech analytics platform. We dove in. We looked for those instances of non-first contact resolution, right? People saying, "Hey, I've called about this before. I'm getting tired of calling about this." Those types of things. And then going back and looking at the original interactions to find out where we went wrong. And what we found out was that 90% of the time, again, this is a specific example of a specific client, but 90% of the time, when we had a first contact resolution issue, it was simply that the customer booked something, but they didn't get a confirmation email. That was 90% of what their first contact resolution issues were. And when we went back and we listened to some of those original calls, the things that triggered the first contact resolution issue, we found that it was a very simple thing. Agents were simply not reading back the email addresses, verifying them and spelling them out to the client. So we were writing down email addresses for clients, but we're not transcribing them correctly. And so we were sending out emails to invalid email addresses, and we weren't able to communicate with the customer as effectively as we had. So they simply reinforced a policy that they'd already had. They had this policy in place that they were to verify email, and their first contact resolution issues dropped precipitously very, very quickly. So just one example, but that really, I think, illustrates the point. A lot of times it's the little things that go into contacts that really make a big difference in the outcome of that interaction.
But so if it is the little things, though, I wonder if there's some hazard to how you would approach that, because on the one hand, that means it's very fixable. So I think if you really make sure all your processes are clean and on point, it sounds like it's very easy to get to a place where you're more consistently delivering first contact resolution. But I also wonder, is focusing on the little things perhaps problematic, because then people are not going to maybe look at the big picture, they'll just try to make little quick fixes. So I guess more broadly, my question is, how do you kind of approach this? Do you start to think about everything and where these little things fit into the big picture, or do you just go for those quick wins? What's the better way to get started in offering more first contact resolution?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, right? And wouldn't it be great if we could just tackle a couple of small things and everything would just be great and work out smoothly? So to me, it's really it's looking at you start off the process by looking at the big picture, right? That's where you start. So when we're looking at our overall metrics, we're looking at customer service, we're looking at repeat caller effort, we're looking at customer journey, we're looking at all of these things, and we're looking specifically for pain points, right? And what, in my experience, in some cases, those pain points might be a large sweeping change that needs to happen in the contact center. That could potentially be the case. In my experience, I haven't found that to be the case. Most of the time, we have the tools in place, we have the policies in place, and it's simply a matter of executing on what we know we need to do already. And what it comes down to is making sure that you have a group of agents that we are coaching and training and focusing on those, again, the little things that make such a huge difference to the overall outcome of a conversation. You know, it's things like poorly trained agents, right? People that maybe aren't totally familiar with the policy or of the company, maybe aren't as familiar with their actual product and the capabilities of their service as they should be. So they might be giving customers incorrect information, which again is incredibly frustrating and leads to repeated calls and additional call effort. And then on top of that, we all, again, come from the contact center world, and we know that combating agent apathy is a huge deal. So making sure that your agents, part of your coaching program, part of your planning program, should be to make sure that you have an agent engagement aspect to your coaching and your training programs, to make sure, because they're, again, where the rubber hits the road, they make all the difference. And really, first contact resolution comes down to what your agents do on that contact. So, you know, focus on look at the big picture, but you're going to narrow it down with a magnifying glass, and you're going to find out the individual issues that are causing your larger problem.
Definitely makes sense. Now, you know, one of the areas here is that, you know, we talked about first contact resolution, but I think there's something bigger at stake there, and there's something more forward-looking, and that's the idea of next call prevention. So if you're an organization, you know, what can you do to not only sort of make sure that the individual customer's issues are solved on the first contact, but start to think about preventing future contacts, future issues for customers?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I hate to dispute Brad, but even though I do agree with focusing on the little things, a lot of times what we're seeing are problems with the big things. And one of my favorite examples is just a misalignment of KPIs that drive bad behavior in the world of first call resolution. And I'll tie that into next call prevention. So my favorite example is a large telco company here in the US. They did some out-of-the-box analysis, if you will, on the overall cost to serve customers. And they found out that even though they met their average handle time goals consistently, the overall journey of serving a customer once they bought a very specific type of phone tended to span over an average of 3 calls. When they checked the root cause, it turned out that one aspect of turning on the data service for the phone, and we've all been through some stuff like that, caused customers to call back again and again. And they actually found that they were completely misaligned to KPIs. So on one hand, it's of course encouraging that proactive behavior that we've always been encouraging of agents. But on the other hand, it's also understanding the ramifications of measuring and putting KPIs, for example, on the dreaded average handle time, right? And all they did here was they encouraged proactivity with more scripting here, and they eliminated the AHT goal. And then when they measured again, they found out that overall their average handle time across calls was much less, even though that initial call was over what they had set it as targets. So being proactive sometimes means breaking the rules on the bigger topics like KPIs. Now, you asked about predictive. So how do we become more predictive about this? You can go back to that same story and talk about how can we know if we might be getting an additional call from the customer, and you can really translate that pretty easily to if they're calling about a specific product and you've used your analytics and you know that the agent hasn't followed the proactive procedure, then you could probably expect a callback, right? We actually have another telco customer that measures next call prevention, and what they do is they actually for any type of journey of a customer that could cause an additional call based on automated propensity models, they measure that first agent in the call center and give them a score of next call prevention. And that score starts at 100, if you will, and is diminished if there's a subsequent call by that same customer, even if it's about a different topic. Right? If there's a high propensity that there are other topics and they didn't pitch them or they didn't talk about them or they didn't try to engage the customer about them, which today's analytics make it very easy to find out, then they actually are penalized from that score. And that's another aspect, I think, of some of the failures that we see in the world of first call resolution. Is it's one thing to educate to first call resolution, and it's another thing to measure and hold agents and teams accountable to that first call resolution. And when you get into this kind of in-depth understanding of next call prevention, creating scores, automating the visibility of these scores throughout the organization, and measuring your agents by that, that's where you're going to get, that great alignment from top to bottom on how much first call resolution or next call prevention is important.
And then not just talking about predictive, but also the idea of proactive engagement, because there is predicting, where the call volume is coming from, what issues may be happening, what might cause recurrences. But then there's reaching out to customers ahead of time before issues even emerge to kind of build that relationship. So what is your take on not only going to understanding issues and preventing them and predicting them, but also proactively working with customers to avoid them?
Absolutely. So part of what I very much believe in is there's a lot in the data that we're not utilizing today. So if you look at the overall journey of a customer, you can really become predictive about what they're going to do next. And if you find the right point in time in which to become predictive, you can avoid subsequent stress on the customer, and decrease loyalty rates and increase frustration, et cetera. So for an example, one of our customers, a financial firm, we're able to take a look at what they're doing on the web, for example, and use that to predict what kind of call they're about to have when they call into the call center, right? So being able to create that prediction allows us to route it to the right skilled person with the right information from what they did on the web in order to provide a more meaningful conversation. Now that's real-time prediction, but even take that one step back. Many of our customers look at how can we get predictive about the drivers of net promoter score of customer satisfaction or loyalty scores, which are very important to the organization. And you don't want to catch that after you've had a bad call or as the customer comes in angry. And we all know customers today come in angry to a contact center many times. You want that earlier on in the journey with the customer, so you can really evaluate and look at their journey and say, if they have gone, through a specific type of process and there was a specific result to that process, and, they went on the web and didn't complete a transaction, et cetera, all of this together means that they're 50% more likely to become detractors down the line. And that's where you could really push it out to be more proactive and even do some outbound calling in order to make sure that you don't get back to that point of no return where customers are severely dissatisfied and it's hard to recover.
Great. So moving on to pain point 3, we have a lack of personalization. And this is the idea that the customer expects the interaction to be personalized, but that's a broad term. I think personalization is a buzzword we use in the contact center customer management space. I think it's a broad expectation customers have for their interactions. But I want to, over the next few minutes, kind of unpack what that really means for organizations and what organizations have to do to provide that. So first of all, Brad, from your standpoint, what is the expectation when it comes to personalization? Are we talking about in-depth conversations about your vacation, about your dog, about what you had for lunch today, or is it something a little bit more simple and straightforward than that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I don't want to downplay small talk on, it depends in the right situation that can be, a customer building tool. But, just again, in my experience, when people reach out to a contact center, they're trying to get something resolved, right? They're not necessarily trying to make a friend. So when we're talking about personalization, again, let's go back and let's put ourselves, this is a recurring theme with me, but let's go back and put ourselves in the shoes of our customer. When you're a client and you're calling into an organization or contacting an organization in some way, what are your expectations? And, the reality of the world that we live in today, there's a lot of people that kind of, we joke about, how Google is watching everything we do and they're tracking us throughout the world and they know every step that we take. But at the same time, we all really benefit from that, right? I mean, we all like getting those, those directed marketing messages that, oh, hey, here's this new thing that I wasn't aware of that's here now. It's a new product that's available to me that they're presenting to me because they know who I am and they know who I am as a client. They have, looked at my experiences with their organization, the different channels of communication that I've used to contact them, what I've been interested in the past, what I've purchased in the past, my browsing history. We have all of this information. And the expectation for people at this point is, when I call into you, unless this is the very first conversation that I've ever had with your organization, I expect that for you to know who I am and for you to a certain extent personalize that journey to me. If I'm coming through the chat channel and I decide that I need to talk to somebody, I should be able to call into the contact center and have them, really have a history with me, and to know what I've done and what I was talking about with that chat client or chat agent before I talked to the person on the phone. So to me, that's really what it boils down to. It's really it's not so much, again, trying to make a friend. It's more about really tailoring that interaction to the interests of that client. That's how I see it.
I know that we keep coming back to omnichannel, but I think it is very important because a lot of these concepts, I think, in their infancy were designed with the idea of a conversation in mind. Even what I just told you, when I talked about personalization, one of the extreme examples I gave was talking to them about their day, about their dog, about their lunch, that sort of thing. But conversations are, happening in different channels. And so for starters, I think, what can you do to sort of make sure that the information you need to personalize is available across the board? But then more broadly, when you think about the different interactions you have in different channels, what can you do to make sure that each one of those is properly personalized?
Yeah, no, it's the key question, right? In today's world is how do we manage all of the different channels of communication that people have available to them? And what is their preference? People generally, from an omni-channel perspective or a multi-channel perspective, generally, at least I can speak for myself, I don't have one particular preference. It depends where I am. If I'm sitting on the couch and I don't have a computer in front of me, I'm generally going to want to call. If I'm sitting in my office, I might want to have a chat communication so that I can, kind of pay attention to it while I'm also doing other things and multitasking. So the omni-channel question, the multi-channel question is really the key to all of this and really improving customer satisfaction overall. So to me, the real key to it is you need to enable your agents, regardless of channel, with the tools that they need to really understand that customer. Meaning we need to have detailed, again, this doesn't necessarily apply to every industry, but in most cases, we need to have detailed, give your agent access to detailed CRM records that show the history of this client, that show what their interests are, that show their history with your organization. So we need to enable them with that. And we also need to train our agents on the overall customer journey so that when an agent is dealing with a client that might be on chat today but was on a phone call yesterday, that they have an understanding of how that happened. That they have access to the history where this person, how often they're accessing your website, because that is all, again, it's all a part of that conversation. To your point, and we need to make sure that we're enabling our agents with the information that they need in order to to really personalize that conversation with that particular client. So it really comes down to enabling your agents with the right tools. And also, of course, training them to use those tools effectively and efficiently to make natural interactions with clients, as opposed to, again, maybe things that might feel a little more forced. Instead, we're really just focused on their journey and their interests and what they're trying to accomplish with your organization.
And kind of in the same vein, when looking at the standard for personalization, one of the things I mentioned earlier was the idea of the different expectations customers have across channels, and you also dove deeply into that topic. And so when we think about personalization, obviously I think you definitely don't want to have to repeat yourself. You want like a live agent to have some familiarity. But when you just log into live chat or to a self-service tool, are you also expecting some degree of personalization there? So I'm wondering how the expectation may differ across channels, particularly the non-conversational, more transactional ones.
I think the expectation is always there as a consumer. When I'm talking to one organization, I'm looking at that organization as one. My insurance provider is my insurance provider, my phone provider is my phone provider. I don't care which channel. Brad has a tendency to call or write or web, depending on where he is and what's more convenient to him. A lot of customers are like that. So I don't really care how I interact with you. I want that interaction to be personalized regardless. And I see you as one organization. So how do you not know? You talked about the fact that, one of the biggest faux pas in the world of contact center is asking for a number twice. To that extent, it's the same thing with anything personalized. Customers want to know that you're taking into account everything they've said in order for you to provide better value to them. So, one example, and it's easier to understand in the world of marketing and sales. We have a big entertainment company that's a customer of ours, and they provide personalized offers on their website. And that always reminds me, I keep on talking about houses, but I just bought a new house about a year and a half ago. And when I told my insurance broker that it was handling my homeowner's insurance about myself, he wanted to sell me some car insurance, I said, listen, I live in New York City. I don't have a car. From that moment on, when I finalized the insurance, to this day, every 2 weeks at least, I get a marketing offer for car insurance from this insurance company. And that, it seems harmless. Most of it is an email. Sometimes they'll send me a mailer, but it is harmful because I don't read any of the email from that company anymore. And because they're irrelevant. They're a waste of my time. This entertainment company that we're working with was using the information about what did the customer talk about when they call? What did they do on the website? What did they look at? What other things have they purchased in the past, and what is their demographic? And all of this information about this customer and pulling it automatically into propensity models, meaning models that are going to dictate what could this customer be wanting to purchase. And, to Brad's point, it's great when you at least we're going to have marketing offers all over the place, right? We can't get away from that. So at least make them relevant to me. And what they do is they actually offer up on the website, for example, or through an agent, specific offers, and they use the acceptance or rejection of those offers in order to dictate some machine learning and the ability to really personalize better all the time for all those types of customers. So this kind of activity, for example, resulted in an uplift of over 20% in the number of accepted offers versus before. So, being able to take get the understanding of the omni-channel environment, take everything that the customer has done and talked about and use that in this modeling and the ability to provide a personalized experience is extremely strong. And of course, you can apply that to any kind of service behavior. It's not necessarily just sales, but you see that sort of tangible, immediate result in the world of sales. And by the way, I wanted to thank you, Brian. I have to say this is the first time that I've heard that a great way for me to meet new friends is to call a call center and chit-chat a little bit. And I think I might use that.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully they're not too strict an average handle time, or there could be some problems there. But I think we should be all right to make those connections. But I do want to also talk about the idea of personalization against the backdrop of a customer journey, because on the one hand, it's obviously clear, and I think both you and Brad seem to agree that they should know who you are as you move throughout the channel when you're trying to solve one problem. What you said in the IVR shouldn't be completely foreign to what happens when you're talking to the live agent. But what about down the road? 3 years from now, should those agents know what happened in the IVR that one time you called about your broken phone in the past? To what extent personalization kind of a fluid, ongoing thing that needs to be part of the entire journey as opposed to just the individual interaction?
I think there's a cutoff between information and analytics, right? And insight, if you will. And, as Brad suggested, sure, there's a lot of information in the CRM, but, as you just brought up, how many years of information are they going to read while they're on a call trying to service a customer? And the beautiful thing in the world of analytics is that you're able to get an understanding and get quick to an insight, and be able to use that information, but in a covert way versus in the overt way of letting agents read it. Right? Agents have a lot of ability to understand and process information. They're probably the speediest ones at doing that in the industry because that's what they have to do every day. But there's a limit to that. And understanding customer behaviors over time and being able to apply that to automated machine learning predictive decisions and then maybe chew that up and pop that up as an offer to the agent for the agent to provide. So the agent doesn't necessarily understand why this offer came to be, but they have an understanding of, they have that offer in front of them, and that system takes all of that into account. Same thing with, service abilities or recommending a proactive, set up my data on my phone, et cetera. Again, you can use a lot of the information about the customer as well as some best practices and chew them up and bottle them up in an automated way. Things that, we couldn't do 20 years ago. Today, technology is there. And organizations can capitalize on that ability to even go back 20 years of a customer and figure that out. Ask insurance companies what they want. They want to understand all milestones of life in order to better service a customer. You're not going to have your agents read that all, while they're answering a call as they get that information. You want that to be chewed up. You want that to be part of the consideration of what needs to happen next. And solutions, software solutions and technology can provide that today.
And I was accidentally flipping around the screen, so I might have spoiled this next one a little bit. But our next pain point area will focus on the user experience challenges. So again, this is really getting at the idea of the actual platform with which they interact is not doing what it's supposed to from a user experience, user journey standpoint. And so, Brad, once again, it feels like omnichannel is coming up all the time, but I think when you're talking about practice, it really is important. Why, given that we know it's omnichannel, we know it's supposed to be a singular, unified, consistent experience, why is it that certain channels or certain platforms or certain agents even are better equipped to handle customers than others?
Yeah, no, it again, a great question, a great topic. To answer, your initial point of, why is omnichannel coming up all the time? Well, again, this is a cliche, you hear it all the time, but it is absolutely true. We live in an omni-channel world. People have so many options for how they communicate with people. And again, going back to Amit's point from the previous slide, we have essentially the same expectations across channels. Regardless of how I'm communicating with you, I have certain expectations. And unfortunately, in many cases, that is not the case. In many cases, when you almost have to, in a lot of contact centers, pick up the phone and dial if you really want to get a good interaction. You're not going to get that same level of communication through email or through a chat in many cases. Why is that the case? Well, frankly, it's kind of an easy answer. It's poor planning. It's integrating additional channels of communication without properly thinking out and properly planning out their strategy from an omni-channel perspective. I feel very strongly that if organizations are going to be entering into that omni-channel, multi-channel journey, that they need to do so with care and they need to do so with planning. And just throwing an additional channel of communication out there and hoping for the best is not a strategy for success. So we need to go about these things thoughtfully, and frankly, that, in my opinion, most of the time when we fall down, it's due to poor planning.
And thinking about it from a workflow standpoint, because getting into the poor planning idea, I think not being prepared, not being equipped is a huge issue, but we do forecast volume. We do start to understand trends, and we have been doing this for many years in the phone arena and even in email for some organizations in person. I've looked at some old brochures we at the IQBC organization did from like 1997, and we had these seminars on volume forecasting, and I don't know that it was necessarily a cutting edge topic then. And so I'm wondering, obviously the idea of being able to predict workflow has been a staple of the contact center. How do we kind of adapt that to the omnichannel world so that we're able to monitor where issues might come in and make sure that we have the right staff, the right workflow management in place?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge, especially when we're first stepping into, when we're first kind of sticking our toes into that multi-channel world, and we're looking to expand our horizons. I'll give you some examples of how customers, in my experience, have dealt with that successfully, in order to be able to predict, okay, if I'm opening up this new channel of communication, how many people do I need to dedicate to that? How much time is that going to take? So probably the most successful organization that I've worked with, from an omni-channel perspective, they were actually, in my opinion, one of kind of the first companies that really truly embraced omni-channel, at least the way that I define omni-channel, right? Which is, really tightly integrated channels where it doesn't matter what channel somebody's communicating on, we're going to get the same result no matter what. And we basically open up every channel of communication that our customers are interested in communicating with us. And again, that's a key point. Channels of communication that our customers are interested in communicating with us on, right? So a lot of folks just want to throw out every channel and make every channel available, whether their customers are interested in it or not. You might not be in an industry, depending on the demographics, where chat is something that people will use, or social media is something that people will use. It might be pretty much phone calls and email. So the way we can go about it is we can, first of all, what I always recommend is starting with talking to your customers, right? Doing surveys of your customer base to find out what are their preferred channels of communication. From that, you're going to be able to extrapolate out and say, okay, well, I have X number of clients. In our survey, 20% of the folks that communicated with us said that they would like to use chat. 50% said they'd like to use email. 10% said they'd like to communicate with us via social media, depending on the demographics in the organization. That's going to give you a really good baseline from which to start. Of course, then you have to look at things from a handle time perspective. Are we going to be doing multi-threaded chats where we have multiple chats going on at the same time? How is that going to affect our customer experience? And again, how's that going to affect our handle time? The way we can do that is by, and again, this is directly from a customer that we worked with that was very successful with this. They piloted the program. They chose some of their gold, they called them their gold clients, the folks that kind of spent the most money with them, and they opened up these channels just to them first to get an idea of how long these communications were going to take. Now they knew in general how many people were interested in every channel of communication. They knew the amount of time it took to handle, and they were able to extrapolate out and figure out how many resources we needed in order to handle that call volume. So again, that's kind of I don't know if that's more detail than you were looking for as far as how to figure that stuff out. I'd kind of say one other point there. When you're looking to I don't know that this goes directly to the workflow, but one of the areas that you really need to focus on when you're starting up a new multi-channel or omni-channel strategy is making sure that you have the right people on those channels of communication. That is going to significantly help your ability to handle those contacts in a reasonable amount of time. If you have people that can, if they're using a written form of communication, people that can write coherently and can do so in a reasonable amount of time, right? It's not necessarily written communication skills, unfortunately, are something that you're going to have a very big challenge training someone how to do. When they come into your organization, they're either going to have that capability or they're not. For the most part, you probably could train somebody if you really wanted to dedicate some time to it, but frankly, you're going to be much better served to make sure you have the right people in those roles with the right skill sets to start out with. So, make sure that you're focusing on that, putting the right resources in place, and giving the right number with the right amount of available time to handle the number of contacts that you estimate.
Moving over to the nice side of the equation. So one area here is on the monitoring approach. And so obviously, you know, one of the big areas, and we've seen a lot of talk about the idea of not just kind of relying on your own assessment of the user experience journey, but thinking about what customers are facing. So what is your perspective about how you can maybe use monitoring to help remedy some of these user experience challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That question is excellent because I'm very passionate about this subject, and I'm going to say one thing that's going to complicate things a little bit. User experience is time sensitive. So you can do a great job of planning, a great job of selecting channels, a great job of preparing and put together process, and in 6 months, something, you know, depending on your industry and the macro condition of the market, or something in your products has changed, or you have a marketing campaign that completely disrupts it, and you're sort of back to square one a little bit. And I would say that one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is treating this like a, you know, in the world of software, we call it a waterfall process. We plan, we execute, it's perfect forever. No. You got to take things with agility, be able to measure them at any given time. You need to be able to wake up in the morning and know how you did yesterday and use that to plan how you're going to do tomorrow. A great example of this is a channel that we already talked about and we hate talking about, which is the IVR, right? So IVR in its day in its heydays, sure, some organizations poorly planned it, but some organizations took painstaking efforts to planning and making sure that all the menu items were configured absolutely perfectly so that customers would get an answer to anything they need in the easiest way possible. And then they forgot about it and they left it alone. And now, you know, that sort of black sheep of the self-service channels, IVR, in many organizations is the root of all evil from a perspective of customer experience and user experience. And not having their finger on the pulse of what's going on with the IVR, where are people navigating, where are they dropping out, what's happening there, and really understanding that on a day-to-day basis is causing a lot of organizations, or at least a week-to-week basis, right, is causing a lot of organizations angst because it's not just that it's there and not effective, it's there and not effective and ruining some perception of customer loyalty and customer experience in the channel. And that is extremely, extremely important.
And then looking at just thinking about the user experience when you buy technology, I think this really came up. It's one of the big discussions around IVR in particular, is that everyone kind of maybe was drawn to exciting technology or exciting functionality or efficiency and never really considered the user experience and what the user is actually going through. So moving forward, if the user experience is going to be a pain point worth remedying, to what extent should it really be part of the sourcing process when you're looking at technology for your contact center or customer experience function?
Absolutely. I think flexibility is key. So even if something seems to be to you a great user experience today, don't assume it will be a great user experience tomorrow. I know that what I'm saying puts people in a really big, you know, black hole of, okay, so we won't select any technology. That's not what I meant. I mean, take a look at the user experience today, but also take the same kind of look at agility and flexibility of the platform so that you can constantly change and tweak that user experience without big, gigantic IT spends and projects. And you can do that with agility to keep up with customer trends. I think we all know just through this whole conversation, customer trends are speeding up, right? Changes in preferences. Today it's, you know, some of them might prefer text messaging and email. Tomorrow it's going to be WhatsApp or whatever the latest application is for interaction. We have companies trying to interact with customers with Twitter. Some companies succeed with it, some don't succeed at all. So, you know, you're trying to be proactive about it, but user tendencies and preferences tend to change. And even within the user experience of that channel, they tend to change. So the biggest thing that I would say for everybody looking at evaluating technology, it's all about flexibility and ease of flexibility.
That makes sense. And I think that's really key, is that the evolution. I mean, we've already seen so many trends arrive, so many kind of fade away, and you can't buy technology with a finite endpoint in mind. You have to be looking toward how can it evolve with you as your customers change, as your operation changes, and go from there. So we move into the final pain point. This is the lack of agent knowledge. So the idea that when the customers are interacting with an agent, they're not impressed. Either they're getting inconsistent information or downright inaccurate information, or just the agent doesn't come off as an expert. And they really need to be, because they're supposed to be the one solving the problem. And I think that's going to be especially true as we talk about self-service kind of handling the simple matters, agents being expected to handle the complex ones. More and more customers are going to look to agents to have this higher level of expertise and knowledge to really provide resolutions. And so, Brad, starting with you, agent training was actually one of our identified as our #1 investment category for organizations in the performance report we did this year. Everyone knows coaching and training are important. You go to our CCW event, coaching sessions tend to be very popular. Everyone cares about it. So what is this scenario where agents lack knowledge when it comes time to actually interact with customers?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, right? Because in a perfect world, and again, I believe this very strongly, there is no substitute for a well-trained agent. There's no technology that is better than a well-trained agent within a contact center. And I believe that very strongly, that a well-trained agent is the fastest path to happy, satisfied customers. That is why we spend so much time and effort, not only directly coaching our agents and training our agents, but talking about it externally, having discussions and trying to innovate and find new ways to coach and train. In a perfect world, we could coach and train our agents to the point of success, and we would never have to worry about anything else. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we have to deal with agent turnover and churn. And that is where technology comes into place to help to kind of bolster your newer agents, right? So to me, that's really the balance that you have to find. Is we need to train our agents. We absolutely need to focus on training them and making sure that they have the right tools or the right skills, I should say. But we also, for those people that are new within the contact center that have been there for less than 18 months, which, let's face it, we live in the contact center world, depending on the organization that you're in, an 18-month tenure, that could be your most senior person. But anybody under 18 months, they're generally not going to know everything, and they're going to need tools to help to back them up. So, it's finding a balance between those two things that I think is the real key.
And then I think that loss of the knowledge pool is certainly affected, and that's a challenge. But the knowledge issue actually runs a little bit deeper. It's not just agents not necessarily knowing the answer or being well trained or having enough experience. A lot of where you run into problems, and yet again, especially in the omnichannel world, is the lack of consistency of information, where one agent will say one thing that was either wrong or an overpromise or whatever it may be, and that's not backed up by the next agent with whom they speak. And then you have another source of customer frustration. Not only is the customer upset that they didn't get the right information, but they are upset because the two agents don't seem to be on the same page and they're getting conflicting information. I actually had this problem with my bank last night, where I was told something specifically last night, and then I called back this morning and what they told me was a lie. And so not only was I mad about the lie, but I was mad because now I had to go through the entire process again. It's really frustrating. So what can you do to not only, I think, just make sure that you already talked about the role technology can play in kind of preserving some knowledge well and getting agents up to speed, but what can you do to kind of create that system of checks and balances where what certain agents are saying is kind of being communicated consistently and uniformly across the business?
Yeah, that's a really, really important topic. Really important topic. You're absolutely right, because when, again, I can tell just from listening to you how frustrated that situation made you, and I can tell you there is, in my personal experience, when I perceive, whether it's true or not, but if I perceive that an agent has lied to me, they told me something that was incorrect, and they knew it was incorrect, There is nothing that will cause me to write off an organization faster than that, especially if you deal with that multiple times. Now, what's the root cause, right? What's the root cause from a contact center perspective to why that happened? Well, there's really two. It's one, it's a poorly trained agent without the right tools, right? So we haven't trained this person to understand our products and our services the way that they should. And we also haven't enabled them by giving them the tools that they need to be able to answer questions accurately and honestly. So we haven't given them access to any sort of knowledge base, which is frankly, a really critical aspect to any organization where people are handling lots of customer questions, is have a knowledge base where I can go and very quickly, very easily, while I'm on the phone with somebody, look up an answer that I need to find. Now, so how do we do that? Well, again, coaching and training, right? We coach our agents, we train our agents, we teach them to use the tools that they have available to them. I'm also a big fan of doing group coaching sessions with your agents, getting a huddle together once a week. Let's go over the most complicated question that we had from a customer. And let's all walk through it. How would you have answered this question? How would you have done that? So those things are all critically important. There are tools that you can use to make sure that your agents are delivering consistent messaging. So speech analytics tools are a great way to have 100% analysis to make sure that people aren't delivering messages that are incorrect. And then on top of that, this is the other, so I mentioned there's really two root causes. One was agent training and lack of tools. The other root cause, and this goes more to the folks who, might be being dishonest with customers and knowing that they're dishonest, going back to an agent that might actually be lying to you, is agent apathy. I think we've all probably had the experience where we're on the phone with an agent that just doesn't care. And is just trying to tell us whatever they think we want to hear in order to get us off the phone. That's a more insidious problem. And again, it's something that we find generally we are going to find through a QA process. But remember, again, we have analytics tool sets out there to help us to hopefully identify those issues early and address them with that agent, either by, again, informing them of putting them on some kind of a performance plan, or separating from the organization. So there's a number of things that you can do, but I think again making sure that we have agents that are properly trained is the key, and bolstering that training with the proper tools is really the best way to ensure that we have consistency across the organization.
And then moving over, Adi, to the measurement side. So, one of the, I think obviously this is already tricky in and of itself, the idea of measuring agent knowledge and accuracy, but I also think it's important. And so I'm wondering, what are some steps you recommend to measure agent knowledge and accuracy? And I can tell you your answer is going to be important, because from our research report, the majority of organizations noted that they're not actually actively measuring return on learning. And so they're not even measuring, I think, the impact of their training and their coaching whatsoever. And given how Brad just talked about the importance of training and the role technology can play in that regard, clearly I think we need a better sense of what knowledgeable agents should look like and how those should score. So what are some recommendations you have there?
So I'll keep it to 3 recommendations: analytics, analytics, analytics. So in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you started. And the world of customer experience is extremely quantifiable. So I would say to organizations not to go by gut feelings, that's applied afterwards, but at least measure the customer calls and what subjects are coming up on those calls. Measure the impact to customer satisfaction and experience through surveys. Measure the impact to repeat calling and the overall customer journey through journey analytics. And use KPIs, simple KPIs, in order to help understand what those measurements mean and how to best tackle in the organization. I mean, we all know that contact centers, they have a tougher job today than they ever did, because the complexities, the amount of information customers come in with, and the complexities of the omni-channel environment, and the fact that most people will only call in when they're when they're done with the other channels and they feel like they're not getting the answer they need, or if they have no other choice, it means that there's a lot of pressure and a lot of knowledge responsibility on these organizations. And you really have to decide where you're going to put your eggs. I mean, you could train agents perfectly, and tomorrow there's a marketing campaign, and this happened with a couple of customers I visited, and suddenly the agents are not up to speed with some intricacies of that campaign. And of course, there's sort of that global understanding and training, but at the same time, you want to measure where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck at helping customers understand specific topics, and where I should focus my training on in order to really impact the overall satisfaction and effort that customers bring in. And to do all that, you have to know where you are, you have to know where you start, you have to have an ongoing measurement, and analytics is the key. If you have a call center of 10 people, maybe you don't need analytics. But if you have a call center that's 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 agents, the bigger you are, the more important it is to really consume that with analytics and have an understanding of what that means from a key KPI perspective.
So you have to know where you're starting, but how do you make sure that you're getting to where you're going as effectively and efficiently as possible? What do you do? How do you determine what results are good enough, what aren't, and more importantly, look into the root causes, what those results really mean, communicate those to budget holders, to leaders, to team members, to start with your analytics, start with your measurements, but actually drive improvement?
Absolutely. And part of those measurements are the improvement, right? It's our understanding, how was it yesterday and how is that driving things up today? So in the world of agent knowledge, for example, I would definitely look at categorization of voice of the customer, for example, of surveys, right? So if you're doing a post-call survey, make sure that that's within your analytics to understand if the customer has provided feedback on specific areas. And then align that with specific agents, align that with specific overall journeys, and say, okay, there's a tendency or percentage-wise of customers that go through this type of journey with this type of issue to receive poor feedback on agent knowledge specific to that, right? And start from there. That's sort of your directional. And then you want to uncover a little bit more about those issues. Then you can go into more of the case by case and sort of aggregate that from the bottom up. But start directionally from the top down using analytics in order to understand where you need to focus and where you need to put those improvements in quickly, and where you have to wait and analyze a little bit more or approach things a little bit differently.
So that brings us to the end of the pain points, but and we are a little bit past the half hour, I know, but we do technically have till 3 with the webinar, so I want to definitely ask this final question because I believe it's very important. We've heard our speakers talk about a lot of recommendations, identify some challenges, but it's always good to kind of ask them to put their money where their mouth is. And by that, I mean, show that they have some tools in place and that they have some success. And so I'm going to give each of them a chance to kind of talk about what their organization has done to help alleviate some of these pain points and just in general create a better customer experience operation. Brad, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So, again, just kind of overarching theme, if I were to summarize everything that we've been talking about today, my big thing is focus on the customer experience. Put yourself in the customer's shoes and try to think of what you would want from perspective of your organization. It's sometimes tough to do, to try to take that outsider view and look at things. I'll give you one example of a customer. I couldn't agree more with Amit's point about regarding analytics. One of our customers was this is from an example from a fairly large credit union that was interested in really diving deep into negative customer experiences that their customers were complaining about. They used their analytics tools, speech analytics and text analytics in particular, to see what people were complaining about. And what they found by and large is people were really, really happy with their customer service, both in the branches and on the phone. The one area that they really were frustrated by was the interface with their ATM. That was their issue. They instituted a program in order to reinvent that ATM interface and saw not only improvements in customer satisfaction, but also saw really important improvements in their overall profitability, because they had people that were now handling things via ATM self-service that normally would have come into a branch, normally would have had to call a phone. So they not only improved their bottom line, but they also improved customer satisfaction. And they did all of that by focusing on customer experience using analytics.
And then moving to the NICE side of the equation, what are some things that you've done to, I think, really empower remedying pain points?
Lots of stuff, Brian. I think most of you know NICE as a customer experience solutions provider and a very established one in the market. So I'm going to sort of narrow it a little bit. And today I'm going to talk about something that is more of a fresh topic in that area, just the last few years, which is NICE customer journey solutions. And the purpose of these kind of solutions is to provide consistent platform for understanding that overall customer experience and the customer journey across the different channels. And to the point of some of the answers that I gave today and some of the discussion points, it is an omni-channel world, and we need to have a deep understanding of what customers are doing in those different channels and how that all comes together in the context of their perceived journey. One of the customers that we have talked about the importance of any platform that you bring today in the world of customer experience to be something that promotes democratization of the data. And I think that's really key. I don't know if many of you on the line remember the days, and I think they're still ongoing, where the IT department in your organization many times was sort of a black hole of, I'm going to send in a request and then I get a number 542, and that's when my project's going to be done. Well, the new IT black hole is data analysts and data analysis. So the way that the organization will work is anybody that has a question about what are my customers doing, what are the percentage of customers that require a truck roll for a communications company? What are the percentage of customers that require claims from a certain demographic and then call the call center? All of those types of questions go into trickle down into this black hole, I call it, not because it's a bad thing, but because it's sort of a project-based reactive environment where they look manually at all this information. And the solution to this problem, and this is much like other markets such as the voice of the customer market, a big solution to this problem is to democratize the information. And to do that, you really have to provide that understanding and transparency to the customer journey and to the customer experience throughout the entire organization. And one of the things that we feel strongly about is starting from visualization. So instead of providing things in numbers and Excel spreadsheets and log files and in ways that you would need a data analyst team to really churn up and chew up before it can come out, you're really providing access to all levels of the organization, from a very business-oriented executive to an IT person, to a data analyst, to a customer experience manager, in a very visual way that allows everybody to speak the same language, align and speak that same language, and be able to take ownership. And then you're going to have a much better trickle-down effect of that ownership and how that impacts the organization in improving the customer experience. So, what Customer Journey Solutions does and what NICE does in that realm is provide that platform for distributing that information in a very, very easy way to the entire organization in a real-time way on a day-to-day basis, so that there could be consistent improvement and organizations can grow from that perspective in that new competitive arena of the customer experience.
Well, that does bring us to the end of the conversation, but we did have had a few great customer questions, and we'll make sure to pass those along to both of our speakers. And if you don't, for whatever reason, trust me to pass those along, you can also check out the NICE and Calabrio booths, download some content from them in the virtual exhibit hall, and send messages to them that will be relayed directly to their team. But there was one question that really stood out, and I think it really ties in very much to the idea of the recurring omni-channel discussion that we've been having, and that really concerns the idea of the casual tone of the conversation. So in today's world, is it okay to, when you decide to engage with customers in a casual way, make jokes, get to know them on kind of an intimate level, and when you have to offer a very formal tone, is that based on issue type? Is it based on channel? Is it based on generation? Curious what both of you think about that. I thought that was a really great question from the audience.
I think casual is good, but it's all about the context, right? So, and I think Brad mentioned this about training agents in a way that is contextual and does empower them with more of the decision process versus telling them exactly how they should take care of things. So there is good things about casualness. What I would add to that is it's also about your brand. I hate to bring marketing into the equation, but I'm going to bring marketing into the equation. How is your brand perception? What do you do as a brand? And your agents are a face of that brand, and your website is, and any channel of interaction is, and those faces of the brand need to communicate in a way that's consistent with the brand, right? And that brand, the brand perception is also centered around, how you want customers to perceive you, how your demographic of customers do perceive you. So there's a lot of work put into that brand perception. And what I would say is just, sure, casual is great. I love casual. Again, it depends on the context, and it depends on what brand we're talking about and how that brand is perceived and how it wants to be perceived by their customer base.
Brad, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would have responded earlier, but I was muted. But yeah, I completely agree. The reality is, if you are a pet food company, it's going to be slightly different expectations from customers than if you are a large credit card conglomerate, right? And somebody that is responsible, or a healthcare company that's responsible for, people's private data. There's different expectations that we have. Casual is great in certain instances, but you're definitely going to want to be more formal in others. And I absolutely agree. It boils down to your marketing, the industry, and the brand perception that you're trying to put out there.
Well, great. So that does bring us to the end of today's roundtable. And by virtue of that, the end of today's sessions, keep in mind that, as I mentioned, the virtual exhibit hall will remain open. And the earlier session from today will also be made available on demand right after 3 o'clock. So you will be able to tune in if you missed that one. You'll also be able to head to the booth and meet a lot of different organizations. But more importantly, I think, more excitingly, perhaps, download hundreds of pieces of content from these different organizations, free research reports, ebooks, brochures, videos, all kinds of great stuff. And so it's really worth going in there. And of course, if you do go in there, your activity is tracked for points, and our leaderboard is keeping track, and our top performers on the leaderboard will be entered to win one of the 2 prizes you see here, the GoPro or the Google Home. So there's a lot of value, not only in the content, but also what gathering that content can win for you. I want to thank our speakers from Calabrio and NICE. I also want to thank everyone who's participated and submitted questions and attended. We're really thrilled with the response thus far to the CX virtual event. And of course, we still have one great day remaining tomorrow, which will really be very forward-looking. We have a phenomenal speaker on artificial intelligence. We're looking at sort of investment management as well. So it's going to be a tremendous day and really a great conclusion to an event that we're really proud of, and another opportunity to ask your questions, get to know the industry, and have your customer experience questions answered, so that come Friday, when you start thinking about ways to distance yourself from the competition, you have real examples, real insights, real benchmarking on which to draw, and therefore real motivation and real knowledge to beat your competitors, satisfy your customers, and win for your business. On behalf of CCW Digital, this has been Brian Cantor. Thanks for joining us on day 2. We'll see you tomorrow for day 3.